the Troubles, as they were known in the 70s and 80s, were a time of terrible trauma, with the Protestants and the Catholics literally killing each other, often in the most appalling ways. And this group, who became known as the Shankill Butchers, were theoretically a Protestant force who were attacking Catholics, but in my opinion, sectarianism had very little to do with it. This were just, unfortunately, a group of men, serial killers, who found each other. They are known to have killed 23 people, almost certainly killed more. And they didn't only kill Catholics, they also killed Protestants. But let's begin at the beginning. The Shankill Butchers was named after the road, Shankill Road in Belfast. And if you know Belfast, from the port, there are a series of roads that lead out like spokes on a wheel. And some roads, the Falls is obviously a Catholic area and the Shankill is obviously a Protestant area. And that's why they built peace walls, why they separated the areas out, because they were so. I remember being trapped in the Falls Road under attack from the Protestants, and the cameraman and I were pretty frightened. It's a very scary place in 1971. I have to say I've been back since, and it's a much cheerier place now, but I've been shot at, blown up, and I won't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend going back to those days. Anyway, the Shankill Butchers were started by a man called Lenny Murphy. More about his character in a minute. In September 1972, at the age of 20, he shot and killed a man called Ted Pavis, who was 32, in his home. The Ulster Volunteer Force, to which Murphy theoretically linked himself, a Protestant organisation, had said he'd been selling weapons to the Provisional IRA, their opponents, the Catholic IRA. Murphy, who was without question a aggressive psychopath, intimidated his accomplice in the killings, a man called Mervyn Connor, into a confession that he did it, and Connor killed himself. Murphy was tried and acquitted. However, as there was internment at that stage, he was immediately rearrested and interned, which by that means imprisoned, for 3 years. In May 1975, after he'd served the 3 years, he was released from prison, where, believe it or not, he'd married and had a daughter. I know it gets more bizarre. Murphy became a rogue. He assembled a rogue unit outside the central commands of the Ulster Volunteer Force, in other words, the Central Protestant Command, and set himself up with a kind of hierarchy. There was his first lieutenant was called Mr. A, his second lieutenant was called Mr. B, but it actually was his brother John, and then he had some sergeants, one of whom was called William Moore, who was a taxi driver, and another was called Bobby Basher Bates. Moore had a large collection of knives because he worked in a meat processing factory as a butcher. Another of the sergeants was Big Sam McAllister. On the 2nd of October 1975, Murphy and his gang, including William Moore and Basher Bates, raided drinks premises staffed by 2 men and 2 women. When Moore discovered that they were all Catholics, he shot 3 of them dead and ordered the rest to kill the 4th. That was the first outpouring of the Shankill Butchers. Their headquarters was, of course, on the Shankill Road in a pub, in a room above a pub called the Brown Bear. if you've never been to Belfast, it's quite hard to realise it. We're talking about a very built-up area with houses very close together, with pubs on almost every corner, and with little closes at the back where you can get out into an alley. So you've got houses really cheek by jowl.
I'm feeling it's very Peaky Blinders-esque.
It's very Peaky Blinders. It's very like a sort of Coronation Street in a way. It's very cramped. And of course, it being Belfast, where they are based, almost everybody knows everybody else's business. Never mind. Murphy and his mob, the Butchers, on the night of the 24th of November, they went searching for a Catholic to abduct. They were searching in Moore's taxi. It was a black taxi, like you see them in London. At those point, quite a lot of the Belfast taxis were actually like London cabs. And they came across a man called Edward Crossan. They dragged him into the taxi and beat him up outrageously. Eventually, Murphy dragged him out of the taxi, took him into an alleys between the two sets of houses, and slit his throat from ear to ear so badly that he almost decapitated him. I'd like to say it was unusual, but unfortunately it wasn't. On the 30th of November, just a few days later, Murphy executed Noel Nog Shaw in front of an entire 20-strong Ulster Volunteer Force unit. He stood him up at the front, shot him, and went back to the bar. His mother and his brother, John, and Moore dumped the body half a mile away.
Could just get away with that, could you?
Well, the Ulster Volunteer Force weren't going to criticise Murphy, who was theoretically supporting them. You are talking about very troubled times.
Sounds very lawless.
It's very lawless. Anyway, on the 7th of February 1976 and on the 22nd of February 1976, 2 further men were killed by the Shankill Butchers. They were called Thomas Quinn and Francis Rice. And by now, the headlines are strong. These are the Shankill Butchers, and they are intent on intimidating at least the Catholic population. Well, they're certainly having the effect. Moore, however, now decides that he's going to sell the black cab and buy a yellow Ford Cortina, which to become their new method of transport.
Very inconspicuous.
Yes, but by the time they've got the headlines, they've attracted the attention of Detective Chief Inspector Jimmy Nesbitt, who was charged by the then called the Police Service of Northern Ireland. No, it wasn't called that. It was called the Royal Ulster Constabulary at that point. It didn't change till later. Charged by the Royal Ulster Constabulary with tracking down the gang. But they were careful and they were thorough. They would clean the premises, bleach the premises, be very careful with the weaponry. And they would always stash it away in hiding places. They weren't carrying the machete or the knife in their pocket all the time. But then, extraordinarily, Murphy goes even more rogue. And on the 11th of March, 1976, he tries to kill a Catholic lady in a drive-by shooting. He fails and gets arrested. Well, you might have thought, mightn't you, that would be the end of the Butchers of Shankill, or the Shankill Butchers.
Sense not.
It wasn't. In prison, Murphy instructs Mr. A and Mr. B, his 2 lieutenants, that the cutthroat killings must go on. He then opts for a plea bargain on a firearms charge and gets 12 years. But the Butchers' killing spree goes on. Murphy is now directing it from inside jail.